Welcome to the podcast. This week, Fui's off doing some more stock take, so we're joined by Aussie Dude, who's agreed to sit in for Fui. How you going, dude?
Yeah, not too bad.
I believe you were appropriately just watching the Big Lebowski, which is very good. We'll call you the dude for the rest of the podcast. I just hope you're not drinking any of that bloody milky shit, the cocktails that he was drinking in the movie. Brash is back from special assignment. How you going, Brash? You alive? You done your special assignment research?
Yes, I'm well. I got snagged up in a couch last Friday night. Sorry, I couldn't escape it.
And, of course, good old Blackie's back. How you going, mate?
Oh, I'm very well. I think it's probably worth noting that Aussie Dude found out he was joining us 30 seconds before we started. So in many ways, he's feeling imperfectly for Fui because he had no time to do any research.
That little 30-second window, he still will have done more research than the Fumeister's ever done.
Open up a couple of tabs, make sure I got the scores right.
Oh, you mean browser tabs, not the other sort of tabs. Okay.
Oh, I don't know if you should be saying that.
I think you're giving Fui too much credit. I think he's flat out working out which week it is most of the time, let alone what the scores were in the games.
Oh, you got to give him credit.
He's just thinking, fuck, I hope they ask me about Green Bay.
So you got to give him credit. Last week he had a pretty good joke about the glove. It was so good that neither Blackie nor I understood it. So, yeah, it was great.
So pretty par for the course.
BAU.
Yeah.
All right. We did actually talk about the results from the first game of Week 7 in the preview podcast because we were dumb enough to record after the actual game. But given Brasher and Aussie Dude weren't part of that podcast, gentlemen, what stood out to you from that game, apart from perhaps the most outstanding should I say, assassination of a running quarterback I've ever seen? The guy got dropped. Good old Danny Dimes got dropped like there was a phantom assassin sitting on top of the stadium. What did you think, Aussie Dude?
Karma 3 hours back. That's about it.
Hey, it's the 8th best division. They did their best. Brash, I'm sure you appreciated the game.
I thought he was trying to do a Steve Young impression of
somebody. Steve Young scored.
Yeah, that's right. But it's because he did it in his own New York Giants style, yeah? He just ran out of legs. It was a great play call. You can't argue about that. But no one expected him to take off from his own goal line. But he just ran out of legs, and the old turf monster ate him all up.
Arguably a better runner than passer.
Is this a trick question?
Well, Blackie's the one that's always defending him and saying he's the next Phillip Rivers.
No, he's the next Lamar Jackson.
I had a couple of good passes. That pass to Ingram, about 2 minutes left, was okay. It's just Ingram didn't lay out for it. Cost him the game.
He wasn't that bad last year.
Yeah, and now we're in 2020 and he is bad.
Yeah,
anyway.
So he had, but to answer your question, I think he certainly has the mobility and the escapability that you would want in a guy that you would want ultimately to run a pocket offense. Yeah, so the problem is, New York is just a train wreck at the moment when it comes to football.
He's got the Manning face down as well. You see him on the sideline?
Not the Pate, the other one, yeah.
Well, they both have that same kind of face. It's just one of them's 3/4 forehead.
That's so cruel. We might have to cut that out of the podcast. Moving on from that game, the first of the Sunday games was one of my all-time great detail games, which is why we didn't actually talk about it in the preview, and that was the Bills-Jets game. But I got to say, it was actually a remarkably entertaining game. It was pretty close. For the second week in a row, especially given how weak the Jets are, I thought the Bills looked pretty poor, pretty ordinary, and I'm not sure if that was the Jets dragging them down or if the Bills have hit a bit of a cliff. 18-10 is also a really strange kind of score. For the point spread was that the betting markets were offering was like 15 or 20 points in favor of the Bills. So the Jets actually seem to have done kind of all right, and certainly their defense played well. Blackie, is Josh Allen hitting the wall? Is it all getting a little bit much for him, or was that just one of those shitty games that you file away and move on to the NFC East?
I certainly looked a lot more human over the last couple of weeks. I think they're becoming somewhat vanilla in the red zone, I think. that's just my opinion. It seems to all go through Allen as soon as they get in the red zone or even closer. I'm sure they'll work it out. They don't have that many targets though, but it's a work in progress and they're all pretty young. Most of their good players are locked up and they've got a good coach, so I think they'll figure it out.
They lost their entire tight end room other than Croft.
So they only scored 18 points because they didn't have enough tight ends. Okay, that's
well, everyone's safety has a tight end and he hasn't quite figured out Diggs yet.
True. Brash, did you see much to like out of the Jets, apart from 1 week closer to the Adam Gase experience ending?
They're having a go. Like they've just got absolutely. I don't think their defence is as bad as the overall team record and the perception around it, or not perception, the reality around what the Jets are. You know, if they can't keep the offense on the field and score points, and the defense just gets worn out as well. So they're showing signs on the defensive side of the ball, which is pointedly where Gase doesn't get that involved. So the offense is supposed to be his baby. Quarterback development is supposed to be his baby. On the defensive side, I think there's enough elements there that they can be a good team, and maybe trading away their playmaking free safety wasn't the worst idea in the world when it was all said and done.
Yeah, perhaps soon to be followed out the door by Quinnen Williams. From my point of view, I thought it was really interesting that this was the first official week that Adam Gase supposedly handed off offensive calling duties to Loganes, or however you say that Darrell's name. I didn't think the Jets looked any different. If anything, I think the real crisis for them is on the offensive side, and I didn't think it was possible, but Darnold looks more and more shattered every week. He just has less and less confidence, and more the sort of look of Bambi in the spot, and it's a real shame because I think he had some reasonable fundamentals and some basic ability, but they don't get him out of New York soon or change that coaching staff. He's potentially going to be out of the league in a year, and that'd be a tragedy, given the potential that guy had.
Well, I don't think there's anything really there for him because the offensive line's shit. There's no one to throw to. He's got no running backs that can really do anything, and especially not when the offensive line can't open up any holes, and he's just getting hit a lot and sacked probably 5 times a game. There's nothing for him there. They've absolutely ruined him, and he needs to get out of town as quick as he can because even a new coach isn't going to fix all the problems on that offense.
Probably for me, the other outcome, and I mean, you follow college football pretty closely, Aussie dudes. You're probably closer to this than the rest of us. But I thought it was interesting that this was the first week that Trevor Lawrence has actually come out and said, "I've got an option to stay in college, and I might not declare for the draft, and I might not."
Did he say that?
Put my hand up. Yep.
I thought the
he said
messaging
he's
had
not
consistently
sure,
been. I thought the messaging to the fans had been, "This is it."
Yeah, well, and he's been very strong on this is it, I'm done at the end of this year, and he suddenly backpedaled it. To be fair, he didn't come out yet and say, I'm absolutely staying, but he put a big caveat on it, which he's never ever, he's been so deliberately, for good reason, because, that's a pretty big college program, and the fans get pretty worked up if there's not clear messages. He's been really super clear, and he deserves credit for it, that I've made my decision and I'm going down this path. I think for me it was really revealing that he's finally reached the point where whoever's advising him has made the point to him that it's probably time to start making some noises, because if he gets drafted by the Jets, as Aussie Dude was saying, even if Gase is gone, no guarantee the next coach is going to be any better with the shit show that they've got in the Jets at the moment, So for me, that was actually, although it was somebody that wasn't even in the game and wasn't even on either roster, that was the most important outcome of the game, was that it was the first time there was any kind of a whisper that somebody might be doing a Manning and opting out of being drafted, Anyway, breaking news.
And that is reasonable. And if you think about it, you've got Mahomes that has landed the $500 million extension, right? Now he's a totally different type of quarterback, but is he a franchise difference maker? That's certainly the mail on how he's coming out of college, yeah. So what's he going to do? Play on his rookie contract, which is not chump change when it's all said and done. It's numbers that, other than Fooey, would all aspire to. But the reality of it is he could end up in that long list of footballers who never realised what they could have been just because they ended up in the wrong situation. So if it costs him 1 year at the front end of his contract to get a 20-year career out of it or a 15-year career out of it, why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah,
I'd certainly be advising him that way.
absolutely, and it's also really big for Clemson too, or because I think that, and in fact, not just it, and this is an open kind of secret. There's not just the college he actually plays for, but a number of the other colleges that play against him would love for him to stay in college for one more year because it guarantees them more attention and more attendance when they play in the next year of college football. So it'd be really interesting to see how that unfolds. For me, if that doesn't start sending warning signs to Jets ownership that they got to make a change, nothing will.
I don't think it'll make any difference, will it?
Probably not, Brash. And you said it 2 weeks ago when you said that the fact that they shipped Le'Veon out probably cement the fact that Gase is going to be backed by ownership. And I haven't been able to find one to come on the podcast, but I'd love to know what the Jets fans think of that because it's just tragic. Anyway, the whole discussion's made me depressed. So let's move on. There were 4 in that early slate of Sunday games. There were 4 games that were decided by 1 score or less. And that made it a really entertaining, at least for me, an entertaining period sitting there watching all the games bounce around on Red Zone. Poor old Scotty Hansen ran out of breath. He couldn't keep up with all the jumping screen. Not
he was
necessarily
getting a few things wrong. Just on that, he was actually getting a few things wrong. We should have invited.
Embarrassingly badly wrong too, not like just little bits and pieces.
Yeah, and we've always said how good he is at that thing. I was almost thinking, you know what? You're almost ready to join the Turkeys. If you're going to get that sort of stuff, if you're going to be that incompetent, pronouncing names and getting players wrong and getting the wrong scores and games. Yeah, I'd never noticed it before with him on Monday morning.
Well, I think that might have something to do with the whole production setup for the year because there's no producers in the room with him. It's just him and a camera operator. The producers in his ear are less, and there's less production staff and other people watching the games and directing them to who's scoring and what game they're cutting to. So the whole thing's basically been scaled down so they get less people in the building on the day.
Okay.
I really like that excuse, Aussie dude. That gives me a perfect response next time GG criticises my pronunciation because I don't have enough production staff because of COVID cutbacks. I like it. Blackie, in those 4 one-score games, I think the lowest score was 22 points from any of the 8 teams that was involved. And that was our dear old mates, the choke masters themselves, the Falcons. Is the lack of defense a product of COVID, or is it more just a case of the offensive talent because we've had such a great wide receiver class and there's some pretty gun and run offenses out there? Is it more a case that the offense is just at an all-time elite talent level?
I mean, in that specific game with Atlanta, 2 pretty good players in Golladay and Hockenson did the damage, I think, especially on the last drive. Golladay tore them a new one. I think Falcons are an odd one because they've got some decent players on defense, but they've got some massive holes. I think their secondary is probably picked on a little bit. They've got a lot of question marks.
Like,
they're
why
probably
did you
still
score TDs?
Yeah,
how hard?
That was pretty humorous.
It's 2020 in a nutshell, isn't it, really? Don't score the TD. Just go down.
Although the best part of that was the Lions player pretending to tackle and then letting go so that Gurley didn't go down at the 5.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And you do have to give the Lions credit on that play sequence. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. I just can't believe it. And you could see it when he flopped down on the line. They all stood there and put up the TD sign. It's probably the only time you'll ever see a defender celebrate a touchdown. Brash, were you surprised at how well Stafford played? Or is that more because, as Blackie was saying, that Golladay was back and fit?
No, not at all. I've always been a bit of a closet Stafford fan. If you look over, I always think of Stafford as Rivers with less mistakes. In that, I can't think of. Can you think of too many times over his career where there's boneheaded plays from Stafford that has cost his team the game?
The whole fourth quarter meme.
Sorry?
I think
it's the entire meme of him in the fourth quarter. What was it? The 4 pitches? I see we have a lead. It would be a shame if something were to happen to it. You'd have it just blow in fourth quarter games.
I thought I saw a stat today where he's got like 70 wins and like half of them are he's won on the last drive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
And this is a guy who's played his whole career with 0 running game. I think a lot of people forget the Stafford to Megatron era very quickly. How he was just putting up billion trillion yards every week. He's never had a defense that's been totally functional and sustainable for a year that you can rely on. Right? He's had pockets of his defense supporting him, but I'd go down and argue that there's no quarterback that's had the longevity of him that is more directly contributable to the wins of his teams than anyone else in the league. Probably the only guy that's doing it in a totally different world at the moment is Wilson.
Yeah, I agree with that comparison.
Right.
Probably only for this season. I don't think in previous seasons it hasn't just been Wilson.
First half to last year, Wilson was pretty hot as well. But I can't think of another quarterback who has had such, they say there's, football 3 phases, who is singularly, he's never had an opportunity to rely on a stellar defence, a world-class defence. Maybe for a little while where Schwartz was there as head coach early, but I always thought he's been good. He's never had a running game, never had a defence to rely on, questionable coaching. I think he's very much an underrated quarterback, if that's possible, for a guy that's been in the league that long.
Yeah, a lot of that falls on the franchise itself, because the reason Megatron quit is because of the franchise. They just wouldn't get any help, and he was just sick of those constant losing seasons, and then they wouldn't trade him, so he just said, fuck it, I'll quit.
Yeah.
Basically the same as Barry Sanders in the 90s. He was sick of the same shit.
Yeah. So to answer your question, which I've sort of forgotten now, if you think he's a good quarterback, yes, I do think he's a good quarterback.
That wasn't actually the question, but that's good.
Well,
I'll edit it to make it pretend that was the question. Look, I think probably the other thing that stood out to me, so the Lions-Falcons game was obviously the one that got a lot of immediate attention in terms of the close ones, but the Steelers-Titans game I thought was really entertaining. Really surprised that old man, and it's a shame American Crow hasn't shared his views more broadly, because of course we're really unsure on what his view about Pittsburgh is. Big Ben Roethlisberger is actually playing quite well, and their defense is playing far better than I thought it would this year. And of course, the cherry on top is this young rookie Claypool, who's really outperforming, I think, what a lot of people expected he'd do. Brash, do you see potentially the Steelers making a deep run in the playoffs this year? Because they've got a pretty soft schedule for the rest of the year.
I think they've got one of the easiest schedules left in the league. Yeah, they should. They're undefeated. They're the last team standing undefeated. They should, with an easy schedule, they should finish top if Roethlisberger stays healthy, which is always a big if. Claypool just joins another line of wide receivers that Steelers just find. That's what they do. You go back to Lynn Swan. All they do is find wide receivers that nobody else really had at the top tier, and they turn them into top tier wide receivers. Their defense playing outstanding. I can't see why. I don't think the Ravens should give them too many problems this weekend. I could see them very easily winning their division and getting the number 1 seed in the AFC.
Undefeated season?
No, I've given up on that one because the Packers let me down in that regard. But no, not undefeated. No, they'll get the number 1 seed, but I don't think they'll be in the Super Bowl.
Blackie, what went wrong for the Titans? Too much Tannehill, not enough Derrick Henry?
I don't think Tannehill's the problem. I think they just ran into a good team.
Steelers came out hot.
Yeah, they're a very, very good team across the board. Their D-line's probably one of the best going around. I don't know when Taylor went down, but he's a big loss to them. Probably hurt their run game and the pass game, but A.J. Brown's a certified stud. Corey Davis looked like he's an actual NFL player. Henry's Henry. Jonas Smith's been good too, so they'll be fine.
I thought they'd take a backward step when they lost Devin Bush to such a serious injury, but they just seem to keep on trucking on. And I have to say, I gained a bit of respect. It almost makes my teeth grind to say it, but I gained a bit of respect after the game with the way that Tomlin was very gracious in winning and acknowledged how well the Titans had played, and I just thought that was really good to see instead of some of the trash talking shit that the Steelers have trotted out in previous years. Aussie dude, what was your takeout from that game? Claypool going to be a real good young gun?
Oh, I don't think he really did much this game, but he had a real good game a few weeks ago. I thought I liked him coming out of Notre Dame because he was basically that one real big, intimidating type of wide receiver that we don't tend to see anymore. But this year's class had basically wide receivers for everyone. If you wanted your big guys, you had Claypool. You wanted your speedy guys. You had Ayuk that went to the Niners, and you had a bunch of just your big, tall, fast guys that basically everyone else got except for the Packers. But,
Sorry, did Ayuk go to the Niners? I can't believe Brash hasn't talked about that every episode for at least 10 minutes every episode.
Mate, the jersey is
Just that one
ordered.
highlight.
Just understand this. The jersey is ordered. So
Whoever's looking after Ayuk better book in that knee surgery
love that
followed
guy.
by the Achilles surgery.
I love that guy.
You can't love him too much if you bought his jersey.
I like any footballer that when he's got the ball in his hand, doesn't matter where it is, he can score. And that's that guy. So, and it's been a long time since we had that guy. I just love him. Sorry for the man.
Back onto the game. One thing I noticed was probably the first time I've really had a proper look at the Steelers, and Big Ben's he's not holding onto the ball anywhere near as much as he used to. So I'm not sure that I'm worried about him getting hurt because he doesn't hold on to it for 7 seconds anymore and take 20 hits a game. It's more like your, 3.5 seconds and then throw it and let your wide receivers do all the work. And
they've started
the offensive line will hold up for that long. So
yeah,
he's
they've
not
got a very
worried
good
about
offensive
giving up.
line still. And again, a bit like on defense where I thought Devin Bush being out would hurt him. They had, I think it was DeCastro, and one other offensive line starter went down with injuries before the game, and I thought that would hurt him. And actually, the backups played really, really well. So yeah, like you say, I think they're doing a really good job of changing the game to reflect, I think, the fact that Ben's getting older. And just not as capable as he used to be. And that's the exact opposite of, for example, New Orleans, where they just haven't adjusted their game plan. They're still pretending that Drew Brees is 28, can chuck the ball 40 yards, So yeah, I think the Steelers coaches went up a fair bit in my estimation, as you say in Aussie Dude. They've done a really good job of adjusting that game plan. Some of that's because they got...
Even with Bush going down, it probably makes them look smarter for picking up Fitzpatrick last year, because that trade really worked well for them last year, and it's probably paying off just as much this year. And TJ Watt's still an absolute monster at linebacker.
Yeah, absolutely. And young. And the other thing that's nice for me when I look at their roster is they're not in cap hell. They actually have one of the benefits of having both Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell storm out the door is their cap situation is actually pretty positive considering how much young talent they got on the roster. I mean, their main issue is, as we saw last year, what happens if Roethlisberger gets hurt. But that they'll go as far as he takes. I think that remains the story of the Steelers. Is Big Ben's the Steelers?
I think they were focusing a bit on that in the coverage, because late in the game they were focusing a lot on Josh Dobbs on the sideline as his backup, basically saying, if Big Ben goes down, this is what they've got left, and there's a reason why.
What about Mason Rudolph? How can you forget Mason Rudolph? Goodness me. Panthers Saints, the return of the great Teddy Bridgewater to New Orleans, where his career restarted and got a great spark. What did you think, Blackie? Was that an expected fade out by the Cam McCarthy-less Panthers, or was it more a case of Bridgewater just really didn't play well, but the rest of the Panthers got close?
Yeah, I think they're going to struggle without their best offensive player. So that's no real surprise. It's a close game. I don't think either of these teams are going to do much damage, but Panthers are probably playing more above their pay grade than the Saints at the moment. But it was a good showing for DJ Moore. I'm a pretty big believer in him. I think his target share is pretty nominal. He does a lot with it, and I suspect once he starts getting targets, we'll be talking about him in consideration for one of the better wide receivers going around.
Now, Gigi's going to have my guts for garters because I said Cam McCarthy. I was confusing the Dallas coach with Christian McCaffrey. But anyway, I can edit that out later on, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was confused too.
I think everyone was like, who the fuck's Cam McCarthy? Isn't that the
Docker?
The
Docker player who gets on fire.
Yes.
The Giants wanted to get traded, quit for a year.
They're all missing in action at the moment. Even Mike McCarthy.
Yes, and that's actually what was, because I'm saving some stuff up for when we get to that game. But before we get to the 8th best division in football, Brash, did you think Breeze has turned a corner and he's becoming more reliable again, or was this more a case of Drew Brees?
So you're asking me whether a 473-year-old quarterback is finally becoming reliable again? Yeah, he's shot. He's gone. It's all over. I don't even want to talk about the Saints because they're pretenders. Well, they're boring now. They're just not.
You're telling me that the 3-point win is boring.
The most exciting thing about that game was cheering for a NFL record field goal. Yes, it was.
Aussie dude, back me up here. Was this a reasonably entertaining game, or was it all horseshit?
Definitely the latter, but couldn't really care much about the NFC South other than Tampa anymore. Not much there. You know, you have your Falcons that will probably blow a 200-point lead if they ever got one, and you have Saints who are rolling out some dusty old corpse that struggles to throw it more than 2 inches, and you have the Panthers that missing their best player. That they have a couple of other good players there, and we've finally seen what Robbie Anderson can do when he's not shackled by Gase and the Jets. So that's probably another highlight for the Panthers is they have a second wide receiver there, and maybe when they get McCaffrey back, then they can show something. And maybe not so much for this year, but certainly for next year, because they are a lot more balanced, because let's not give the ball to McCaffrey and have him as 95% of the offense.
Yeah, and I think that's good, dude. I think that's where it will hold them in good stead is, as Blakey said, uncovers more, that other players will emerge, and maybe McCaffrey has to fit in rather than just overlay. Going forward, maybe they do create a more balanced offense going forward. But poor old, there was one thing from this game. Sorry, BPG. There I was the week before saying how I'd root for Teddy Bridgewater and he never makes mistakes. I guess he either had a great sense of theatre or it was just a boneheaded play to take that sack on that, when they're in field goal range. And, that was, after saying how, the guy doesn't make mistakes, he won't cost you games. He probably cost them that by taking that 8-yard sack and just pushing the field goal attempt 6 inches too far out.
Yeah, and it was that field goal didn't miss by much, and you gapped it perfectly. Missed it by a fooey, as people would say.
Missed it by a Super Bowl chicken wing.
The interesting thing about that game was that with Bridgewater going back to New Orleans, John Gruden going back to Las Vegas Raiders, and Garoppolo going back to the Patriots, that was one of, I think, 3 games where there was a bit of a, shall we say, reunion type theme to it. And I actually thought that was part of what seemed to be affecting Bridgewater more than anything else. He certainly got a lot of warm support from the Saints after the game, and I think that was nice to see. Of course, we can't let American Crow's game of the week go by without commenting on that. The Browns beat the Bengals in a non-defense game that was nothing but scoring. And they wound up winning by just 3 points, which makes the Browns 5-2, which just sums up 2020 in a nutshell. They're 5-2 despite the fact they've been outscored by 21 points. And they're one of 3 teams this year that are 5-2, despite having lower points for them points again. The other 2 are Buffalo and Chicago. And I find that's 2020 in a stat, really, for me. I know Brash loves my pointless stats, but I thought that was one that was worth sharing.
I saw that one, but it was only the NFC teams, and everyone was like plus 20, plus 30, and then there was the Bears -2 or something like that.
The one high quality 5-2 team in the NFC, and I think last week's episode was highlighted by Blackie's terribly perceptive and wonderfully insightful use of the phrase "somewhat fraudulent," which of course Fooey then had to mimic like a parrot. But I think that stat, the fact that we've got for the first time since the NFL merger, we've got 3 teams in the 1 year that are 5-2 but have been outscored. I think that says everything about why there's genuine skepticism. Are the Browns the real deal? Are the Bills really trustworthy? Can they really be trusted to go deep in the season? And is Nick Foles really actually going to take the Bears where they need to go? For me, that's actually one of the interesting undercurrents of the season is there's some teams with bloody good records, and the Rams are probably in this boat too, that just aren't convincing. Brash, what do you reckon?
Nick Foles stat for you a bit later then.
Yeah, the Rams, I'm not a huge fan of Goff. They're very gettable. It was interesting watching the week before when the 49ers played them. I think it was a Sunday night game, and it was noted during the contest that the Rams play what they called a deep back and front defense. So they rely on Donald and the defensive line to disrupt the quarterback, and then they play their defensive backfield extremely deep. So which is really weird because they've probably got the worst linebacking core in the league, right? So you're exposing them. You're actually making them play in greater space. And you have a look at the way the 49ers played after coming off that disgusting game against Miami. All they did was just got the ball out of Garoppolo's hands as quick as they could and nullify Donald and get the ball into the offensive skill players' hands where the defensive backs were so far away they couldn't make a play on it. So that's the way you beat the Rams. So
yards after catch in that midfield catch. 8 or 9 yards a catch, you know?
Yeah, and as long as they draw up every play as it's got to go for Goff, every single snap, then they'll score some points on offense. But they haven't. They've still got 5 of their 6 games in the NFC West to go, and the one they've played, they lost. So if I was betting my money, I'd absolutely seriously considering backing against in pretty well every one of those contests.
Just coming back to the Browns-Bengals game, given our resident Joe Burrow fan has disappeared to finish his stock take, I might throw to you, Aussie dude, was Joe Burrow's just a victim of a really bad offensive line yet again, or are we starting to see some really fundamental flaws in his decision making?
I think a bit of both. Look, that game is 20 seconds shorter, and it's a Bengals win because I was watching the last drive live after the Packers game, and I was like, Jesus, this might go into overtime if they even score, and then they end up getting the touchdown with about 10 seconds left, the Browns. And in games like that, you think, if we just stayed in bounds for one more play or something, nothing really impressive from the Browns either, even though, 20 straight completions by Mayfield. But watching it, you didn't really get the sense that it was anything really that special. It's just the start of the game, you're like, he's probably pretty lucky he didn't get pulled for the interception. And it was started 0 for 5 with an interception and tore Beckham's knee out, and then he just gets hot and doesn't miss a pass until the end of the game when they spike it. But you watch that and you're not you're not thinking, when's the last time this bloke missed a pass, because it just didn't feel like one of those types of hot streaks from a quarterback.
Watching that, I
don't think you're not giving Mayfield enough credit. He worked out that he needed to get Beckham off the field and out of the offense, and then he'd be suddenly successful.
Actually, I was going to ask you, BPG. It is not uncommon for a quarterback. It's fair to say that OBG is a bigger name in football than Mayfield, as much as Mayfield thinks he's the biggest name in football, right? So maybe he's a little bit intimidated by OBJ. Maybe he does think he's got to get him the ball more than he does. Maybe he played with more freedom without OBJ on the field. And that's not a slide on Beckham. That's just the subconscious of the quarterback thinking, I've got to look after my my number one player on the team.
Yeah, it's the Steve DeBerg effect. DeBerg was always better when he was throwing to nobodies than when he had Jerry Rice or one of the elite high quality receivers that he had to protect and make a star out of. And I think that's probably true for a hell of a lot of quarterbacks, that they get overshadowed by the demands from their elite receivers for, why aren't you throwing me the ball? Why aren't we being used more? I think it's also fair to say that OBJ's got a history of being disruptive on the sidelines, and he showed that last week when he was massively disruptive when they weren't winning. And I think, I'm not blaming it all on his shoulders, but for me it was interesting that it was like a switch was flicked. Maybe they were all doing it for OBJ. I don't know. Maybe that was actually the motivator, but it was like as Aussie dude.
You know what I think it is? I think there's pressure to feed him, and Rashad Higgins is out there, and I think the chemistry between those two is actually really, really good. No Austin Hooper out. I think they've also started trusting Jedrick Wills a lot more too, and it's actually meant that the tight ends don't have to help block as much and can get up the field.
The entire offense in Cleveland's a lot different to what Beckham was playing in New York, because in New York he was catching basically your slants and just basically quick routes where he'd do all the work, and he could always see when the ball was coming out because Eli Manning was a taller quarterback, so you could see him when he'd turn in his cut when the Browns just seem to be wanting him to do double moves and just deeper routes into double coverage, and he doesn't seem to be the type of player that excels in that, like Randy Moss or players like that ilk.
And he doesn't seem to be selfless enough to willingly play the decoy role to free up others. That just doesn't seem to fit his makeup. He has to actually get a certain number of actual passes thrown to him every week, or he gets really shitty. 2 questions for you, Brash. Do the Browns deserve extra credit for the fact that they've been able to keep going despite Nick Chubb going down? And am I right to be increasingly skeptical about Zach Taylor as a head coach in the NFL? Because for me, and Aussie Jude mentioned how they didn't really manage the clock very well, Zach Taylor coached this game and a number of other ones as if it was college, where it's all about how quickly you can score. And he doesn't seem yet to have adjusted to the NFL, where you, as Andy Reid struggled with for so many years, you need to manage the clock.
Yeah, true. On the first question about are the Browns for real? Is that what you're asking me?
Do they deserve extra credit for how well they've coped with injuries? No,
not really. Don't. You're asking the wrong man if you're going to talk about injuries in the NFL. Right,
I thought you might miss your chance. Cry me
a river on that one. No, I don't think so. Well, they played the Bengals twice. Yeah, they've still got the meat of their schedule coming up. There are 2 standouts in their division, and one team which Sedgway to the Bengals. I don't think the Bengals are trying to win at the moment, to be honest with you. Maybe that, which is a bit of a Bengals DNA most of the time. I don't think they're legitimately trying too hard to win at the moment. I think they're just trying to sort out what's what. Rookie quarterback, rookie coach, and they're going through some teething problems, and I think that's all. They get a pass mark this year. New coach, new quarterback, shortened, abridged preseason, things like clock management. They're all things that you work out. They run 2-minute drills. They run 4-minute drills. They run 6-minute drills at training camp. They haven't had a chance to do any of that this year. So they get a pass from me this year. I think they're actually trying to get better, but I don't think they're trying to win, if that makes sense at the moment. The Browns, I'll wait until they start playing 2 or 3 hard games in a row to see if this is for a real or just a false dawn for them.
Hey, Aussie dude, you'd be happy with the Aaron Rodgers McCringleberry bounce back game against the might, the awesomeness of the Texans?
Yeah, but just one more thing on the Browns game. I think you're going to need to edit that out, because you were talking about are the Browns real when you're talking about the Bengals head coach.
Yeah, no, the 2 different questions.
No, he asked me 2 questions.
The Stefanski, I think, actually deserves a little bit more credit. He's adjusted the NFL offensively, in my view, as well as any of the new coaches have. I think he's terrible as a defensive coach, and I think that'll catch up with them eventually. But in last week's podcast, I went out of my way to heap shit on Zach Taylor, and I'll do it again, because I just think he's a terrible NFL coach. He's got a fair few weapons there in that Bengals team, and he's just not utilizing them. But just to be really clear, I had 2 questions. One was, did the Browns deserve credit for getting over the loss of Nick Chubb and others, which was actually an attempt to bait Brash into having a whinge about how bad the 49ers injury curse is. And then my second question was about the Bengals head coach, Zach Taylor, and whether he was the real deal. And I wasn't really actually that interested in Brash's opinion on the second question about Zach Taylor, because I've already made my mind up. And speaking of making our minds up...
I thought I had a well-reasoned argument on defending Zach Taylor.
It was fabulous.
Stop having a whinge about... Well, if you want to get Brash to stop having a whinge about injuries to the Niners...
I wasn't having a whinge. I wasn't having a whinge at all. We win games.
Not a whinge, but talking about it, all you need is to block him from buying your Niners paraphernalia.
Mate, I guess as a Packers fan, you know what whinges look like, mate. Just have to look at your quarterback every time one of your wide receivers run the wrong route or an offensive lineman doesn't block. You just have to look at Rodgers' face to see what whinging looks like.
Welcome to the podcast. Okay. just moving on. Just moving on. Hey, time out. Just moving on. The Packers-Texans game, did McCringleberry bounce back like his hip thrust, or was it more a case of the Texans were a little flawed, Aussie dude?
It's a game you didn't watch.
I think it's a bit of both. I'm not sure about what the Texan defense is like. I mean, Adams got just about almost 200 yards on him and became the first Packers player to have 2 games in a single season with over 150 yards on a road game and 2 touchdowns or something. The Packers basically marched up and down the field whenever they wanted, other than a bit in, I think, the third quarter, and that's when the Texans mounted a tiny attempt of a comeback. And the Texans have just massive holes everywhere. Like, their defense is pretty lackluster. Like, their linebackers aren't too much chop, and their defensive backfield is getting picked apart most weeks by a quarterback and offensive coordinator that can basically scheme coverage breakdowns. And then you look at the Texans offense and there's not a whole lot there to throw to, and the running game's probably underperforming for what they expected once the trade went through and they got David Johnson in, because he hasn't exactly been a throwback to his best in Arizona before his pretty terrible injury.
So,
it's hard to
Blackie,
really put a read on the Texans because there's just so many question marks everywhere. Like, who are they really throwing to? Because they don't have anyone that really wants to be that number one receiver, and they have a bunch of smaller guys because they have Cooks and Cobb, and then they're using like your running backs like David and Duke Johnson as receivers, and Kenny Stills is not exactly a big guy either, and Will Fuller was never going to be a 1. He was always that good 2 behind Hopkins, but I think everyone saw that when Hopkins was gone, everyone knew that it was going to be a pretty lean year for Fuller as well, getting the number 1 corner and the coverage slide to his side of the field.
Very surprised you're not giving Randall Cobb more reps as the Texans' best receiver. Anyway, look, I think, Blackie, how long till we see Jordan Love?
Well, I think Keyshawn Johnson came out recently and said the word around town is that the Packers already know he's a bust. So he must be fucking shit. And that's not a joke. I don't know if he has any sources in there or this is speculation, but it's pretty interesting irrespective.
No, inaccuracy was a big issue in OTAs, but it apparently wasn't as bad as Aaron Rodgers' rookie year in the OTAs.
To be honest,
some of the worst you could imagine.
I don't think you could write someone off for accuracy issues in year 1. For me, if you were going to write someone off, it's attitude-based.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but yeah, it's hard to believe that a team's written someone off before they've played a minute in the NFL. So take it with a big pinch of salt, I'd say.
I always do, because it's like anything else you say, mate. The Packers-Texans game for me said nothing more than what a soft schedule the Packers have got coming up, and I'm still very skeptical of how the Packers are going to go against a better defensive team, particularly given their awesome wide receiver talent and all the wide receivers they drafted this year. I could be wrong. Which brings us to the last game of that time slot from what we all know is the 8th best division in football. The football team playing everybody's favorite team, the Dallas Cowboys. And for me, that was the best game of the whole damn time slot. If only because Andy Dalton, yet again, got taken out by a really dirty hit. And the only player that reacted to protect him was one of the offensive linemen, stood over him, didn't actually touch him, just stood over him. And you could almost hear the offensive lineman going, Andy, what the matter? Andy's sleeping. And not one person lifted a finger. Nobody even pointed at John Bostich. Nobody stepped up to him and said, what the hell did you do that to my quarterback for?
I think after seeing that hit, though, mate, I think the standard rule is if you think someone's broken their neck, you don't touch them, yeah?
True. Maybe I'm not giving people enough credit.
I don't think anyone wanted to cop a lawsuit for them trying to move him and breaking it and dislocating or disconnecting his spinal cord or something. That was pretty nasty, that hit.
It was outrageous.
How did he not get suspended?
I know. It's just you're getting defensive players pulled up for basically chest bumps on quarterbacks, or where an offensive lineman rolls a defensive lineman into the ankle of a quarterback being called for unnecessary roughness, and that's the same penalty at the end of the day.
I mean, to be fair, Bostich is not Namango, so he doesn't have a reputation for stomping on people. But I don't care. That was a disgraceful, dirty play, and he should have been out for 6 weeks at least. whether he meant it to unfold that way or not, it's just irrelevant. You can't go head hunting. And he left both feet, deliberately lowered his head and kept it down.
It's not even a question.
God knows.
Yeah.
I meant whether he meant to knock the guy out and make his helmet pop off. He definitely meant to hit him with his helmet. Yeah, no doubt about that. I don't know that he necessarily intended to make the dude's helmet pop off and roll along further than Dalton's ever thrown a football. And that was just quietly, I don't want to laugh about it too much, but just quietly, that was the other outstanding piece of that whole sequence. Have a look at who actually goes and picks up the helmet and gently returns it to the Dallas players. And I'll give you a hint, it's not one of the Dallas players. So yeah, I thought
Sweat?
That was hey?
Was it Montez Sweat?
Yes, you're very cluey to this week, Blackie. Must be looking for a distraction from work. For me, I think McCarthy's lost the Cowboys. Jerry Jones's reaction after the game was really interesting, and I reckon McCarthy's got 2 more weeks, I reckon. And particularly if this week, when they're, as we'll talk about in the preview episode, they're facing a certain other team from the 8th best division in football. And if that game goes as badly as the game against Washington went, oh my God, I just cannot see Jones sitting back and just taking it again for another week. He's not Chris Johnson, is he, Brash?
No, I have no doubt the Dallas Cowboys have mailed it in. Here's my tip: who's the next high-profile running back to request a trade? It'll be Zeke. That's what my money is.
Who the fuck is taking that contract on?
Who's taking that 90 mil on?
This could be where the Cowboys end up paying some of it to get rid of it. I reckon he's totally checked out. The fumbles last week, see the intercept this week, see the block he missed on Dalton getting injured.
Did you see him get trucked by Holcomb, the Washington linebacker?
He has totally checked out on the Cowboys.
If he gets traded and they eat some of his contract, it means Dak's out the door, which will be very, very interesting situation.
And maybe Dallas is making a late run. Maybe they trade him to the Jets or something like that and get the number and finish 2 in the draft and get the number 1 pick and get Lawrence. That would be the sort of thing that 2020 needs to end on, even though it would happen early in 2021. I could see something like Lawrence ending up at Dallas and causing us all nightmares for the next 15 years. I can see it.
On McCarthy, I was hearing something about how he lied about how much he was into analytics or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And he's been caught out.
And he got and it's
I don't
not the
think
first
Jerry
time.
will be too keen on that. So it wouldn't surprise me if that 2-week prediction's correct.
Yeah.
So Aussie dude, is this just really showing Mike McCarthy for what he is?
More or less. I mean, the Dallas offense looked really good with Dak there, and I think the fact that McCarthy is an offensive-minded coach, or at least claims to be, will be what keeps his job, unless, like I said in the thread, unless the Saints sack Payton, because everyone knows how much Jerry likes Sean Payton, and he tried to get him and possibly even try to trade for him a few years ago. So I think that's probably the only way that McCarthy doesn't last a year. But next year, absolutely, if they have a year like this, but everyone on the defense won't last November. They'll be gone by Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I just can't see Mike Nolan staying around at 2 weeks, and I'm not sure that that's going to be enough. So much depends on the next 2 games, and if we get a repeat of the kind of absolute, there's some astonishingly bad players by the Cow. I don't want to pick on them. They're a team that's obviously a very long-standing member of a highly competitive division most years. And we all went on about how Jason Garrett was the problem, and the Cowboys would be so much better when Clappy was gone. I'm not convinced anymore. I wonder how much Garrett was covering up real problems in the team. I don't know. But the other thing that stands out about them for me, the Cowboys, is that they were playing a real rebuild team, a real cheap team that didn't have a lot of salary cap, and they were putting a very bloody expensive team out on the field. Even without Dak's salary out there, that's still a very highly paid team on both sides of the ball. And they all played like they didn't give a stuff about anything, Nobody cared.
Do you think Jerry Jones will be willing to admit he's wrong? Because
never.
He hasn't in the past with his mistakes on trades and signing players and extending players and keeping coaches. So he's just not the type of person to admit that he fucked up.
Yeah, 100%. They absolutely do. There are people like this, and I know some of these types, that sort of personality personally, and They are successful because they are just so dogmatic to be successful. So they just ignore where they make mistakes and just charge on to the next thing because they've got the capacity to wipe over it. And he has the capacity to fire McCarthy and start again because it's his money, right? He's got the resources to do that. Just to clarify too, I didn't actually say Elliott would be traded. I said Elliott would be the next high-profile running back asking to be traded. So there is a little bit of a difference there. I just, when this team's supposed to be like one of the favourites in the NFC to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl this year?
Absolutely.
Or have they or has reporting gone the way that we all know, that it's gotten so lazy that they just run certain narratives every year and just see how it works out?
Brash, and this, you know how much this is going to hurt me to say it, but I think the reporting was accurate. When you look at the talent on paper, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, Adam C.D. Lamb, Dak Prescott, Zeke Elliott, one of the highest paid and best qualified offensive lines in the game. Some amazing
Not
talent.
right now.
Not anymore.
Not at the moment.
3 or 4 years ago, yeah, but they've lost a few to free agency and retirements.
Yeah, still one of, so you have a look around, particularly in that division, still one of the highest paid offensive lines compared to
Doesn't
what
mean
Washington. No, get that. But my point is that I think that on paper the presumption was because they were veterans in a division where most of the other offensive lines were rebuilding, that would get them through to the division championship, and that was then an easy run.
I think the accurate commentary is yes, they should have got to the playoffs because of the division they were coming from. Absolutely no doubt. But have a look at them now. They are in a dogfight to win that division. You don't win that division, you're not going to playoffs. That's clear, right? There's no wild card coming out of that division.
It's the only division in NFL history, apart from straight seasons, where we've got to the end of round 7 and not one team has 3 wins.
Yeah. Now I can accept that Prescott is a massive loss for them, given what the drop off. Yeah, even on paper, right? You take Prescott out and you put Dalton in game 1, right? The year on paper, you'd say yes, we should lose something offensively, but they shouldn't be that god awful on defense.
No.
As I keep saying every week. Sorry?
I think we saw that coming on defense because they didn't improve on defense at all, other than getting the defensive tackle from he used to play for Tampa, and he went down in pre-season with a torn tricep or something. Yeah, McCoy. That was about the only thing that they fixed on defense, and their defense was pretty bad last year. It was basically, look how shiny and fast our offense is, but we're going to have to score 60 every week to really do anything.
Yeah. One of the biggest problems for them is they paid a truckload of money to Marcus Lawrence, and he's been terrible ever since.
Yeah.
It's, they're not generating much pressure on the quarterback, and it's exposing their weak secondary, especially after they lost Byron Jones.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that draws out too is just the culture side of things, which seems to be that almost all the players, as soon as they get the big payday, they seem to check out. And that I haven't seen that happen as badly at football teams for probably 4 or 5 years. I have to go back 5 years probably before I remember a team where there was multiple high-paid signings who immediately dropped off as soon as they got their paycheck.
Do you think the salary cap floor that they have to hit plays any factor into that? Sure, teams would be more picky about who they pay if they didn't have to hit that floor. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe it's just Dallas.
And I, for one, have never agreed that there should be a floor. No one's ever been able, or won an argument that I could comprehend anyway. There's lots of things I don't comprehend. I've never understood the reason for a floor in the salary cap. You have to fill your roster. If you don't want to pay players and you want to create a war chest by rolling cap forward to attract free agents, you should be able to do that. You should be able to do that. Or at least if they're going to have a floor, make it like 70% of the cap, not like, what is it, 80, 95% or something must be spent.
To be fair, though, Brash, one of the ways the NFL allows teams to manage that meeting the cap thing, which, as an example, Howie Roseman at the Eagles has been doing for donkey's years, is every single year they restructure contracts to bring forward signing bonuses and push things around.
Sure.
Which, for example, with the AFL system, you're not allowed to do that. The cap is a hard cap in terms of the top cap, but there's also a hard floor that they have to spend.
I know,
that's just kicking the can down the road, because they just convert present. So what they do is they just say, we're going to convert salary now now to signing bonus, which is prorated over the remainder of the salary. So they don't get rid of it; they just defer it, and that's what's happened to the Saints. They've kicked the can down the road while Drew Brees has been there, and now it's coming back to bite them in the arse.
Yeah.
And the Eagles are the same. The Eagles are exactly the same. We kicked the can down the road, and we've reached as far as we, the can's reached the end of the road.
And that's why the league put a cap on how many years out you could create a contract for. Because I remember there were contracts where the guy got paid $60 million for a 12-year contract with a $45 million signing bonus, so they could amortise the signing bonus over 12 years, even though he'd been retired and out of the league for 10 of them, right? So, and that's the stuff they wanted to stop happening. But you look at someone like the Bengals, you got the number one draft pick, so you've got the best quarterback in the league, rookie quarterback in the league on paper anyway. So you set your quarterback for a few years. You've just finished bottom the year before, and you still got to spend the same amount of cash as the two teams that went to the Super Bowl. Makes no sense at all.
But you can say you can push that 10%.
Some of it.
Because it was you need to spend 90% at least.
Yeah, and Aussie, what my argument has always been is it should be the floor should be lower, right? Like I've always said, make it 70%, so you don't have teams rolling out like the replacements, right? And paying guys league minimum just to penny pinch the franchise, right? Which some owners still do, but it's just because they've got the Bengals have to spend a lot of money, and we've just been saying they don't have a very good roster. Okay, so you've got AJ Green that's probably earning a fair bit, and a couple of the defensive linemen and that probably are. But how many guys in that roster are generally worth player for player what the comparable salary would be for their position in the league?
What about Carlos Dunlap losing his shit? He posted on social media that he posted his house for sale on social media. He's that keen to get out of there.
Oh, hang on. That doesn't mean he wants to leave the city. He's just looking for a different downsized location.
No, because in that same ad he said furniture available if you like. So he just wants to get. He doesn't even want to waste time packing the truck to get out. He just wants to go.
Crazy.
All right, we might wrap up that in-depth discussion. I didn't want to spend that long talking about the football team or the Cowboys. I will just leave one thought out there, which we might talk about when we come to talk about next week's games, and that is what the future 2 weeks up ahead hold for both these teams. The football team is on a bye next week, but I think that was a really positive way for them to go into a bye, and I think it was really interesting to see Carl Allen playing. We talked before about Bridgewater as a redemption quarterback. It was really interesting to see Carl Allen playing quarterback for the football team. I think Haskins is a bust. I think Rivera's soured on him. It'll be really interesting to see where they go with Carl Allen, who might also be called Andy Dalton Mark II, as the quarterback of the football team for the rest of the year. And then the second thing, it was just wonderful to see Ron Rivera, who's dealing with quite a serious cancer issue. It was really wonderful to see him still on the sidelines. So hat tip to that.
Yeah.
Regardless of how the game went, that was really positive.
I just want to also say how impressed I was with Antonio Gibson.
Yes.
Had 33 carries in college, had 20 on the weekend for 120 yards, touchdown.
120 yards, touchdown.
It's a weak defense. But
except that the Cowboys are a shit defense, but that was still an impressive performance, especially because the conditions were wet. That was not a perfect football environment, that game. But he was also targeted in the passing game a bit, which I was really impressed by. He's not just a standard grinded out running back. That was.
Well, I think he was more. I think, as I said, he only had 30 odd carries total in college. He was more of a receiver, and they've brought him in, turned him into a running back. So I got to give pretty massive credit there because he looked like a player. He's looked like a player all year, but he was certainly good between the tackles. Looked like a real running back over the weekend. So it looks like they've got a player. Once they've got something more going in the passing game and get some help for Terry McLaurin, I suspect there's a bit of upside to that offense.
Yeah.
And look, considering they lost Trent Williams to the Niners, that offensive line in Washington is not abysmal. They've got some good young building blocks there that they can build a future line around. I got a lot of hope for Washington for the first time in many years. They're getting close to the teams that were the dynasty of the late 80s and the early 90s, Moving
Looking at
on.
their schedule, November could be pretty good for them.
there
Giants,
might-
Lions, Bengals, Cowboys. That's a
I'll
good
put it out
month
there
for
now.
a team.
I was going to leave it till the preview, but given you mentioned it, Aussie dude, I'll put it out there now. They're my tip for the division champs. They'll go as far as Kyle Allen can go without turning the ball over. You know, Brash was talking before about Bridgewater being a classic game manager who isn't spectacular but doesn't turn the ball over. If Kyle Allen can replicate that with Ron Rivera as an experienced head coach and a pretty spunky sort of defensive coach, you know, real young sort of up and coming defensive minds on their coaching, they'll win the division and they'll win it easy.
They have a good defense, but the elephant in the room is still one Daniel Snyder. What happens if he has another hissy fit and demands Haskins gets put in because he's looking good in practice or something?
Or he has to sell jerseys.
They should trade him. They need to trade Haskins.
That's not happening under Snyder. That's his
I
boy.
think there's been a few rumours.
Well, what they should actually do is trade Snyder.
Yeah.
Who was the guy that used to own the LA Clippers that made all the inappropriate remarks?
Sterling.
Donald Sterling. Yeah.
Yeah. What,
I'll trade you with Donald
okay.
Sterling from my Dan Snyder.
I can guarantee you, Danny Boy, the old Madison Avenue marketer, ain't selling that football team until he puts a logo on that thing and gets a year of selling merchandise first. I can guarantee you that.
Totally.
Yeah, there are a lot of Washington fans there who are obviously, not buying, whether it be because of what's going on in the world or because of the fact they don't even have an identity yet. That marketer ain't selling that cash cow until he gets to cash in on the franchise, on the merchandise first.
But there was talk last week that next year they still won't have a name.
Yeah, which just blows me away. How can be? And there's still even more rumblings about his under owners asking him to get out as well. So who knows?
And Jeff Bezos wants to buy them.
Well, maybe we could put together a Giblets package with some financing expertise. I'm not sure who could provide the financing expertise.
Because we live in that world now, I'm still backing the fact that when Donald Trump loses the election, that he goes and buys them.
Yeah, something like that, and they
He
become
cannot afford.
He won't. Well, not just that, but how many times did he try and buy the Bills in the 80s and 90s and get knocked back? And that's why he went to the USFL and started that up.
Yeah, just say he could get a New York franchise and hope it would get integrated into the NFL. Yeah, I know. It's
but now he's got Putin's money behind him. He's unstoppable. Anyway, we won't go there.
He's got 500 million in debt.
Putin's already got a Super Bowl ring, man. He's done.
Beautiful. On that happy note, we will move to what I know is Brash's favourite game of the week. The mighty Kyler Murray-Russell Wilson showdown. What an awesome coaching display by Pete Carroll. Would you agree, Brash?
What? I got nothing on that. Like, seriously, ask me about Drew Brees again. What
38 hours of football, a 3-point game, and you got nothing.
I got plenty on this game. How much better did the Cardinals look defensively when they decided to just sell the farm and blitz Wilson outright? When they just sat back and let him do what he wanted, because the Cardinals are an enigma to me. I sort of hate them because they're in my division, but I sort of admire them because I've got my all-time favourite non-49er playing for them, for starters. But the Cardinals have a way of doing the really hard, spectacular things really well and the fundamentals of football really badly. Yeah. I don't know what Wilson was on in that game. Do you see the intercepts he threw? Like, I know he's become the master of the 50-yard moon ball, but you don't throw it 5 yards. Those interceptions were asking to be intercepted, and they were just ridiculous passes. Me about Pete Carroll, I don't know what role he played in that game, right? The Seattle's defense is horrific, and he's supposed to be a defensive guru, so he's not contributing on that side of the ball. And the offense just go through Wilson.
Is there a worse pass rush in the league than the Seahawks, considering how often they're playing with the wind? Lead, rather.
That's a really good question, and I'm going to refrain and shut up for about 2 minutes on this subject because you watch them turn out like madmen this weekend. If I say anything, I know they're terrible, but we've got them this week. Watch them sack Jimmy G 22 times this weekend.
I'll pay that.
Yeah. So I'm not saying anything.
Look so gassed when they're on the field for only 30 minutes in the game, and the Arizona defense is on for 40. I don't understand how they look so gassed.
That's a really good point because they don't win the time of possession, but they're leading by 30. Nor in most games, yeah, it's weird.
Just hitting home runs the whole time.
Yeah, that's right. And no team, you could probably take Patrick Mahomes out of Kansas and still inch out wins, but you take Russ Wilson out of Seattle, they're a 2-14 team.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I mean, some of that time of
no run game, no defense. Yeah, it's hard to argue.
Absolutely, yeah. And some of that time of possession stat is driven by the fact that Wilson is very sideline focused with his passing, so the receivers catch it and step out. But it's still a complete imbalance. It's the worst imbalance I can remember in time of possession since Andy Reid's early seasons in Philly. And it's just every year it catches up with them. It just catches up with them. And to come back to what Brash was saying about Pete Carroll, they've done nothing about it. If anything, they've invested less and less and less in linebackers and less and less and less in the offensive line.
Yeah.
And more reliant on Russell as a result. And, I'm not a great fan of the Seahawks, and I'm not a great fan of Russell Wilson, but he has, even his detractors like me have to admit, he's got some amazing weapons. And much like they've done in New York, where the Jets have ruined Darnold, if they don't do something to change the approach in the Seahawks organization, every single year Wilson's going to play he's going to bawl his eyes out, absolutely smash it, play really well, and then just run out of steam because he's got nothing. It's just not a sustainable game plan.
I look at Seattle in a different perspective, right? Because there are two games. If I'm not watching games live, there's two things I look for. How the 49ers are going, are they winning, and are Seattle losing? They're the first things I look for every week, for obvious reasons. Watching Seattle, and I watch a lot of Seattle games, whether they're playing divisional rivals, whatever. This is what's frustrating about this game. You're the opposition. Stuff them for a run, incomplete pass. Wilson then scrambles around, first down, bang. Stuff them for a pass, punt, you get the ball, maybe you score, maybe you do something. Next thing, stuff them, fourth down, 70-yard pass or 65-metre scramble. That's how they play. It's just, there was a stat I read on the weekend that the Patriots have one play so far that's gone for more than 21 yards this year. Think about that. The Pats. One part offensive play from scrimmage, 21 yards. That's all. That's the entire. Seattle is the opposite of that. Everything is 60-yard chunk play. There's no 2 clock things or anything like that. And Ozzy makes a really good point. Their defense is just going to get worse and worse as the year goes, as they get more and more gassed, losing the time of possession every single week. It's a really good point. I don't think it's sustainable.
No, and we talked about it when Shuttlesworth and Sven were on with Aussie Dude 2 or 3 weeks ago about the appalling gap between the Seahawks' time of possession stats and the next team on the list. It's just unsustainable. It really is.
And it's frustrating to play against because you think you've got Seattle under your boot, and all of a sudden one of these moonballs comes from nowhere and they score a touchdown. Yeah. So the way they play does not. Like Aussie before was talking about a sense of momentum watching Cleveland play, right? I didn't really look like he was on fire. The same goes with Seattle. The offense sputters along, and all of a sudden, boom, they just hit you with this haymaker from nowhere, yeah? Frustrating as hell, and they'll probably still win the division.
Blackie, you'd no doubt be impressed with a short man running around at quarterback for the Cardinals. How much of their game plan is just Kyler Murray, or is it actually that they've got a whole suite of weapons that he's just complementing really well?
Well, they don't have much in the tight end space. Kirk is all right. They've probably got the best wide receiver going around. Their offensive line is hard to get a read on because of how good Kyler is. I think Chase Edmonds is better than Kenyon Drake, so we'll get to see if that comes to fruition. Their offense is dynamic and it's hard to play. It's hard to plan for. I think my favourite thing out of that game was that Isaiah Simmons actually did something.
Yes. And I think he was only on the field for I think 4 or 8 snaps or something. But my God, he finally delivered in a big way.
Blackie, I'd be interested to hear actually Aussie's opinion on this as well. Do you think Kyler Murray can play as a quarterback in the pocket? Because I don't.
Yes.
I
No,
don't think
do.
he can.
It depends what you mean by pocket, because
I mean, run a scripted route, go through his progressions, and hit the second, third option without running around like an idiot.
the only thing I've worried about is his ability to see over the line.
No,
In all seriousness.
No, that's in all seriousness. When you've got 6'8" lineman and you're 5'8", 5'9", whatever they're lying about this week is his height. I'm serious. I've yet to see him command a drive, and I know Kingsbury's been calling them these plays, but I've yet to, other than that play last week, I think you even commented on it on the thing about the defensive back just let the wide receiver run past him and they scored a 80-yard touchdown or something like that in the week before. I've yet to see him execute any of that stuff down the field. I don't think he can. Crossing up.
I think he can be a pocket passer, but I don't think he has the offensive line to do it. I saw a good comparison for him, and it was basically he is looking like the next Russell Wilson, because he does have to kind of scramble around and stuff like that, but he's got better stats than Wilson did in his first 2 years. I don't like that offensive line. I don't think they can hold up for long enough to let him do that and let him do it consistently enough to be comfortable.
I tell you what I think is a match made in heaven in the upcoming draft would be Pitts, the tight end who looks like the next big thing at tight end, going to the Cardinals.
Yeah. We don't want that to happen.
No, yeah, be your living nightmare. But yeah,
I know.
Look, I think that's the kind of thing that they need to take the offense to the next level, is a guy who can block and is a matchup nightmare. I think that would do a lot for them. But yeah, I agree with Ozzy. I think it's hard to get a gauge on it at the moment. They've got one of the best wide receivers going around, so why would you need to look at your second and third options?
Yeah, but if you sliding door moment, BB doesn't lose his, Bob doesn't lose his mind, and he doesn't end up in Arizona, then what?
Oh, look, you didn't ask me, Brass, so clearly you don't care about my opinion.
I was coming to you with
I reckon the Cardinals. I reckon the Cardinals are more about DeAndre than Kyler, and that's been my view this year. And I reckon of all of the leading kind of threatening teams that are threatening to get up in their divisions and do surprising things, Arizona are the ones that have the best offensive weapons to keep going, particularly with this emergence, and Blackie mentioned it, with the way Chase Edmonds has come out of nowhere. Apart from Mike Davis, Chase Edmonds is the other guy that's just exploded as a running back from nowhere. They've got some real weapons that are not dependent. I mean, you could probably put Andy Dalton or Nate Sudfeld, in that quarterback role at the Cardinals, and with DeAndre Hopkins to throw to, he's still going to make massive yards every week. So Kyler gets a lot of credit at the moment, and rightly so. He's as a young quarterback, he's running around doing his thing, but I think the one thing that they've done really well is build a genuine, sustainable offense. It's not like the Cowboys when Dak Prescott goes down, everything goes to shit, Arguably, they're more flexible and more sustainable than even the Chiefs, because, if Mahomes goes down, who do the Chiefs turn to? Anyway,
even last year, Arizona, I thought were pretty fun to watch. They were inconsistent, but I enjoyed watching Kyler Murray last year, even though they weren't always competitive, because some of the games they were over pretty quickly, but a couple of them, he did win them and brought them back to chances to win and just couldn't quite do it. But I'm starting to really enjoy watching him. One more thing with them, if they do get that tight end from Pitt, might not be the worst thing in the world, because what happened the last time they got a highly touted skill position player from Pitt in the desert, turned out to be everyone's favourite wide receiver of all time, just about.
Yeah, second favourite. I love watching. I've always loved watching the Cardinals for exactly the reason I said before. They can produce some of the most amazing highlights and do some of the most boneheaded. They make the fundamentals look hard, and I love watching them for that reason. There's always something going on in a Cardinals game. It remains to be seen. I just don't think he's a pocket passer. I don't think the laws of physics don't allow him to see the middle of the field. Simple as that.
See, I love this podcast because it's now given us an insight into what Kyler's doing in every huddle when a pass play has been called, which is, guys, crouch down, especially you fucker,
Yeah,
Crouch down. Stay low. He's not calling out pass numbers. He's not telling the wide receivers what to do if there's a blitz on. It's just crouch down, fuckers. Stay low.
I reckon they're going to take Aussie dudes' direction on revamping the offensive line by getting them all kick up their legs off at the knees.
Wanted.
Just have a cut block on every play.
Yeah,
That's right. Every penalty every snap is a penalty for a
it's only a
block.
slipping penalty if two people are blocking the same person.
They'll be the first offensive line in the game to start every play sitting on their knees. On that happy note,
Have Philly not tried that yet?
They're on their knees, but they were somewhere else on the field. We won't go any further than that.
That's how their supporters wake up Sunday mornings.
The only other thing that I will add about that game between the Cardinals and the Seahawks was that for me, the most stunning thing from the week was if anybody but American Crow had sat down with me before the games started and said that there would be two games that would have a scoreline of 37-34, I would not have put the Cardinals Seahawks game and the Browns Bengals game in that slot, and yet that's exactly what happened. So for me, yeah, it was just really interesting to see those four teams, the Browns, the Bengals, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals, are very different teams at very different stages of their rebuild process, but they played such similar games in a lot of ways, and both of those two contests were so dominated by the offense. It's just really fascinating to look at them in hindsight and see how similar they are. The other favorite game, which I think we'll probably throw to Blackie for, because I know it's his favorite game of the week, was watching the emergence of Justin Herbert. Clearly the real deal. Best quarterback in the draft this year, you reckon?
The thing that strikes me the most about him is his release is lightning. He just looks a different quarterback.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. I mean, I think he's on track for 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns, and single-digit interceptions. I think the one thing I probably disagree with the broader commentary is people saying that his supporting cast is no good. I disagree with that. Keenan Allen's he's a top 15 wide receiver. Yeah. Mike Williams is pretty good. Hunter Henry's very, very good. He hasn't had Austin Eckler, but, Kelly's filled in all right. Justin Jackson's just another guy, but I think they're reasonably well coached, and I think the supporting cast is good. But yeah, he hasn't missed a beat. He looks like Mahomes light.
He's amazing. And he's probably got the best offensive. Probably got a better offensive line in front of him than Phillip Rivers ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to pick up Blackie on that. The one thing he didn't compliment, which for me is far and away the most outstanding surprise in the whole NFL, is how good that Chargers offensive line is. It's not massively highly paid, the offensive line. There's at least three guys on that offensive line that you would put squarely in the bucket of reclamation projects or redemption stories. And I don't know who the offensive line coach is. I should probably do a bit of research instead of being like Fooey. But they deserve enormous credit because I think they've turned that Chargers offensive line around and potentially made it really sustainable at quite a cheap price,
I think they've done, Turner and Bulaga are pretty widely regarded.
Yeah.
And I think Forrest Lamp was like a second rounder or something and did his knee. But outside of that, they have done well. It's probably a case, and I was thinking it over the weekend, it was similar to the Bears, where I probably don't know many of their offensive linemen, and that's probably credit to them. Anytime there's a left tackle and you don't know his name, he's doing his job.
Yep.
Okay, the key to success in the NFL is make sure that Blackie never reads the names on the jerseys of the offensive linemen. Then you're guaranteed success.
I think
the offensive line tells you themselves.
That's right.
But if they ever hear their name, it's always because they're in shit.
That's right. That's the only time you ever hear it.
Garrett Bowles holding penalty.
Yeah, holding penalty. 78 offense. Yep. But the BPG, there seems to be a theme that is, maybe it's always been there, but it seems very obvious to me this year. And it's not necessarily a team thing as it is a week-to-week thing. If your offensive line wins on the day, you normally win. It seems to be. I have a look the last couple of weeks how Kansas City have been going with their offensive line. Like when Casey lost a couple of weeks ago, Mahomes looked very, very human. It was all his line. He had no time at all. all night. Yeah,
and arguably Josh Allen and the Bills over the last couple of weeks, while they've won the game this week in week 7, they looked awful, and arguably that was because their offensive line was rubbish. Was one of the big contributors.
Yeah.
So you're definitely onto something there, Brash. Look, I think the other thing for me out of the sorry, I do have one question for Aussie Dude before we get to my other deeply insightful comment. Aussie Dude, you probably track college players more than the three of us. Did you pick Herbert to be this good coming out of college?
Not this fast, because he did show flashes of this at Oregon, and obviously I watched a lot of Oregon games because they are, in the Pac-12, and they are generally on the later games with the.
So you can watch them under the doona in your weekend recovery from the drinking session, yeah.
No, not quite.
With his chicken nuggets.
Not chicken nugget, man.
The Super Bowl of chicken nuggets.
But you saw bits of it. I liked him, but I didn't think he'd be this good this quick. But I didn't know that the Chargers' offensive line would be like this, because even at Oregon they've never really had much of an offensive line. Like, they've had maybe one player here or there, and they've got another one this year. I'm not sure if he's opted back in or not, but overall it's basically just been, get out quick and run, and the offensive line's just the fast guys to make sure they can keep up with the quick tempo there. But now that he's got a proper pro-style offensive line that can hold up, he can move in the pocket and step up and step into his throws, which is probably how he's throwing so many deep passes, because I think he's probably either tied for first or just behind Russell Wilson on 20-yard touchdown passes.
Yeah, good stat, absolutely.
Mm.
And look, I think that the other thing for me that stood out about that game, and I don't want to harp on it, it's unfortunate that teams that start with the letter J are so crap this year, but the Jaguars are just a mess, and I can't see Gardner Minshew being, unless they're genuinely tanking and they want to lose and have a winless season, I can't see Gardner Minshew continue to be handed the keys to that offense every week. But who else have they got? Mike Bloody Glennon?
Glennon. Mate, have you ever seen Riding the Wave YouTube clip? If not, I'm sure GG will post it for you. I tell you what, James Robinson's looked bloody good for them.
He has. And Chenault too, They
I
do
think
have a
Chenault's
couple of...
overrated.
Oh.
I'm calling it. People are anointing him as the wide receiver one. I think that's DJ Chark. I think they're manufacturing touches for Chenault, and it's great. I think he'll be fine, but I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar.
Just because you can't say his name, don't pick on the dude. Brasher, Jaguars are a mess. Is there anything else that needs to be said? Except no team should ever have the letter J in its name going forward.
I don't have an issue with the J. Just one correction: they can't go winless because they've actually won a game this year.
Oh fuck! But did that really count as a win though?
They beat Indianapolis. I think there was a bit of a false dawn. What was it, Indy around week 1? Yeah.
I think we could call that Indianapolis beat Indianapolis in that game with missed field goals. Yeah,
they missed a couple of field goals here and there. The Jags, they're the worst team they're the 4th best team in 7th worst division in best division in football. I haven't given them a lot of airtime recently. I thought they've mailed in the season looking for a top pick. They've got a few draft picks, haven't they, next year?
Oh God, yeah.
So I think they're mailed this year in as well, and they're just waiting for the draft.
My tip on a sneaky trade, if you're putting your money on the betting table, there's been a lot of talk about Cam Newton being traded. Minshew to Dallas.
For what?
You heard it first here. Conditional 7th round pick.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I was just reading potential other trade targets, and there's constant speculation that the Jets are going to trade Quinnen Williams. I don't care what sort of defense you're running, you go out and get him, because he, in my mind, is the definition of a guy who is going to blow up so hard as soon as he's out of that dysfunction and just be a perennial pro bowler.
Yep.
And particularly if he goes to a team, and we're about to throw on what I know was Brash's second favourite game of the week after the Seattle game. If he goes to a team like the Chiefs or he goes to a team like the Broncos who have a lot of defensive talent, he's going to be so much better because he's an excellent player himself. But at the moment on the Jets, they can double team him because there ain't nobody else to worry about, you know? Whereas he goes to a team where there's somebody else, and all of a sudden he's 2 or 3 times the player potentially, you know?
I couldn't agree more with Blackie. I remember leading up to the draft, and it was pretty well established that the Cardinals, who had pick 1, were going quarterback, and then there was Bosa and Williams at 2, and the 49ers were picking next. And there was very strong discussion amongst 49ers fans and very well thought out, compelling argument that Williams should have been the pick over Bosa. I think whoever gets him, I just don't want him to end up. Can you imagine him ending up somewhere like the Rams next to Donald? Can you imagine the nightmare? I'd stop watching football. I just couldn't. It would just be carnage every week. They'll have to bring in special rules to protect quarterbacks. Oh, shit, they've already done that.
And a third ambulance at the stadium.
Cardinals would be massive. I don't want him anywhere near the NFC West. Yeah, I'd draft
the Chargers. Give them another one on the defensive line. This time would be probably inside. Not sure if he can really play defensive end.
The Chargers would be a great place for him to end up.
The other one is the Ravens, and I can see the Ravens making a play for him because he's cheap.
They've got a similar player in Calais Campbell.
Yeah, and they basically become mirror image players of each other, and suddenly you've got injury insurance as well. Anyway, moving straight along because we've got to pick the pace up a little bit. Moving straight along to what I know was, as I said, Brash's second favourite game of the week. The Chiefs took on the Broncos. Brasher, did Blackie's team deliver the goods in sustaining yet another miserable loss? And is Drew Lock the real deal?
No, I think I don't know. I didn't watch this game. I just saw I actually fast forwarded through most of the 40-minute Game Pass package on this. Is Patrick Mahomes in a funk at the moment?
So they scored 43 points.
Yeah, but they scored
20 times, didn't he?
Yeah, they scored on a 90-yard kick return and a pick 6 as well. So that ate into that.
102 yards.
102 yards. Unfortunately.
Not that I was counting.
Yeah, the weather wasn't that fantastic by the looks of it, but I guess the question to you guys is Mahomes in a bit of a funk at the moment?
Look, I think I'll jump in if I can. I think the way to keep Mahomes' stats down is to not deny him possession, and I think the way you do that is with special teams ineptitude and throwing pick 6s. And then blowing yourself up so bad that Chad Henne comes in. I think other teams will start using this as a blueprint. Mahomes could be in trouble.
So you think he's fine?
Yes. I think our defence is decent. They weren't the issue. It was pretty much every other facet of the game.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on Mahomes?
I wouldn't be too concerned yet. It's only really a couple of games, and they just now got a brand new toy with Bell to play with. And
yeah, I know. I was trying to avoid that thought. You watch all these ex-Jets become absolute superstars. They'll all be Pro Bowlers by the end of the year.
Yeah, I saw that Le'Veon Bell only had 2 runs of 15 yards or more his entire time at the Jets, and he had 2 in his first half for the Chiefs.
That's just wrong. It's unfair that some teams can get such a clear advantage out of another team's ineptitude. Yeah, if this was fantasy, I think Blake and I talked about this before. If this was fantasy football, these trades would be knocked back. Right? Sorry, mate. You're on drugs. You're not having that. Yeah. Nothing else to offer BPG.
Are we moving on?
We're moving on, BPG?
Yeah, great.
I think we might move on to what I know was Blackie's favourite game of the week, which was the 49ers against the Patriots. And I'm dead serious when I say I know this was Blackie's favourite game of the week because I predicted, I foresaw in last week's podcast that I thought that the Broncos had solved the Patriots. Well, at least Cam Newton was a quarterback because they were the first team to really have a strong go at restricting the Cam Newton running experience. And they did it really well, which is why they beat the Patriots. And lo and behold, as I predicted, the 49ers rocked up and and Blackie will be wrapped because they proved that the Broncos are the reason why the 49ers won. Is that right, Blackie?
Yep. I think Cam's a shell of what he used to be. If he's not doing anything on his feet, in many ways, he's like Lamar Jackson on reverse steroids. If you keep him in the pocket, he's pretty cooked. Their receiving options are some of the worst going around.
Hey. They've still got Edelman in the wheelchair. Give him some credit.
Yeah, it's bad. N'Keal Harry looks like a wasted pick. Their run game has zero identity, and they've had, 5 players sit out for the year.
Yeah.
They're no good. They got a lot of problems. But knowing Bill, he'll probably do bad enough, and they'll end up with Justin Fields, and he'll be the next Brady.
Brash, you might think about your game for a minute. Aussie dude, who starts this week? They keep saying Cam Newton's going to start again for the Patriots. Did you watch the game, and what did you think of the 49ers? Did they really smash them, or was it more that Cam lost the game?
Didn't watch the game. I just read a couple of little bits about it and saw that CBS decided to just dig the knee in and do a Brady update late in the game. But I'm confused about Cam Newton because the first month or so he looked as good as he had in years, and then he got COVID, and I'm not sure exactly if we know what that can do to people yet, whether or not that's helped to contribute to with it, or if it's some of the hits, because Cam Newton's basically the dude from the game Operation.
The little model, yeah. And in all seriousness, I shouldn't laugh about it. That's a really good point you make about COVID. In the baseball season, we had a number of players get COVID and recover, but
and then come back on the pitch for the trophy. For the trophy celebration.
Yeah, that happened.
He got pulled from the middle of the game. He got pulled from the game.
That wasn't a recovered player. That was a player that was still sick who's probably infected his entire roster as a result. But the point I was trying to make
was... NFL doesn't do tests on game day because they won't get them back in time. You don't want to take a player off in the second quarter and go, whoops, you shouldn't have been playing.
and particularly, in the Super Bowl, can you imagine if you said, hey, we detected you at halftime with COVID, you can't hang around when your team's won, you've got to go sit by yourself in a separate locker room. Nobody's going to do that. But the point I was more going to raise was that there was a number of players who contracted COVID in April and May and were declared as recovered by early June, and of course the baseball season started in late June. They were all back up and playing, but about 60% of the players that were infected have reported that they never really felt like they were back to peak fitness, and things like hand-eye coordination and blurred vision were problems. So it'll be interesting to see, and I hadn't actually thought too much about it before, but it's a really good point you make, Aussie dude, that whether that's an issue. For what it's worth, I actually don't think, I think it's a deeper-seated problem. In those first 3 weeks, the Patriots were playing a scheme or a system that was classic Belichick. Not a lot of people had seen it on film. As I said last week, the Broncos actually had done a lot of film study, and you could see they had a very deliberate, Vic Fangio brought in a real deliberate game plan, which almost mirrored what he used to do at the 49ers as the DC. And it worked. And surprise, surprise, the 49ers, with much better defensive talent than the Broncos, replicated it. I thought, I don't want to underplay Jimmy Garoppolo. He had a decent game, but you guys were spectacular, I thought, Brash.
Yeah, just let me pick you up on that. I'm just making a note of it. So COVID is now blamed for baseballers having a batting slump. Okay, that's good. So I'll just add that.
Not what I said.
COVID, that's more things that get added to the COVID problem. I've got a hand-eye coordination. I've had 7 Ks in a row. I can't get on first base. Let's blame COVID. Okay, let's move on from that. 49ers were okay. We didn't have any problem at all keeping Cam Newton in the pocket because the way he was throwing the ball, he couldn't have hit if he couldn't have hit open receiver on Sunday if the entire 49ers roster was on IR. He was terrible. There were 3 passes in a row on third down where he had open receivers where the 49ers defensive back gave him too much cushion, and he threw it 5 metres in the dirt in front of his receiver. Right, that's got nothing to do with defence. Right, we didn't sack him the whole game. right?
So you agree with my posit theory that actually Cam lost that rather than you guys winning it.
I don't. I'm with Aussie. He looked really good the first month. Everyone thought, oh, okay, this is the Patriots. It's really about Belichick and system quarterbacks and blah blah blah. But then Blackie's also 1,000,000% right as well. Harry's only loosely, use this term very loosely, number one quarterback. Edelman was spending more time breaking equipment on the sideline than catching balls. He had one target for the game, right? One target for the game, which was thrown behind him. He tipped it and it was intercepted. I don't know. I don't know maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe it is after effects of being sick. Was he actually sick or just positive anyway? I don't know.
Yeah, that's open
right?
question. Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So let's not draw too long a bow on that one. But I genuinely was excited to see, as much as he didn't look himself because he just didn't carry that I'm better than everyone else attitude that he normally runs around with, right? That having fun and all the rest of it. He sat forlornly on the bench. He didn't sulk. Belichick came over and gave him a bit of a pat on the backside and said, no, it's all right, I'm going to sit you. He just never looked for 1 minute. I didn't think the 49ers did anything special on defence. I just thought he would just never look like he was going to threaten anyone. He was almost like how Ozzy was describing Mayfield, never looked special. The only difference was Mayfield actually hit receivers.
Didn't make the fundamental mistakes that Cam did.
Not even mistake. I think he threw, I don't know, I can't remember how many, I think a couple of intercepted. There were a couple were tipped, I think, for sure. But the first one he threw straight to Warner, I don't even know what he was doing that one. And that, coincidentally, if Warner didn't catch it, it would have ended up in the dirt 3 meters in front of the intended receiver again.
Yeah.
He just looked rubbish. There's something not right there. And I'm just, if he'd come out this way at the start of the season, I'd accept it. But he actually set a bit of a reasonable benchmark for what he looked like, the way he could play.
And that's why I actually think, I'm not trying to, I want to be honest for a second. I'm always honest in this podcast, just sometimes a little bit sarcastic. I am not trying to make a big song and dance about the COVID stuff, but something's gone on, whether it's a relationship issue and there's been a blow up in the locker room, or whether it's just a dynamic, who knows? He might have an off-field issue going on with his family or something, who knows? But he was awesome in that first 3 weeks of the season. He was a real redemption story. Him and Belichick were working real well. Part of me says, and I want to repeat Brash's old line, but part of me says it's just the other teams have watched. And, I go back to what I said last week. The Broncos watched some film, worked him out. Now everybody's copying the Broncos and they're getting it done.
Mate,
I will say,
in week one, no, seriously, to give you to why I suggest it's not, cast your mind back to the way Newton played in Seattle against Seattle. He duked it out all night with Wilson and probably should have won.
Yeah, I agree with that. Look, the only thing that I will say to add to that, before I ask Blackie for some last thoughts on what it was definitely his favourite game of the week, I'm sure. I'm not a big Cam Newton fan, right? And I think it's fair to say that most people would agree that Week 7 game was probably one of the real low points of Cam's career. After the game, I thought Cam Newton was subjected to one of the most disgracefully personal, gutless, baseless attacks I've ever heard from an NFL media commentator, especially somebody who's a former player, and that was Jeff Garcia, who just unloaded on a completely irrelevant issue, which is how Cam chooses to dress after games. Cam could have taken that as a real victim. He could have beaten that up and said, stop picking on me, leave me alone. He didn't. He fronted up to it and he dealt with it. And I thought it was an amazingly effective way to respond to some pretty amazingly gutless and pathetic commentary from somebody who it was a joke of a player, to be frank, and certainly has done nothing to deserve the right to make those sort of comments about a person on a personal level. And particularly in this year when there's so much shit's gone on in the world, we don't need that kind of personal attack on individual players from a major network commentator. Anyway, my rant is over. Blackie, did you have anything to add from the 49ers-Patriots game?
Yes, Jason Barrett is having an all-pro caliber season. He slotted straight in. He looks $1 million. Sure, Brash is very happy with him.
Extremely happy. Did I mention that Brandon Ayuk had a good game?
Who's that?
Ooh.
No, I'm absolutely very. They just don't even throw to him at his side of the field. We haven't had that since Deion Sanders.
Yeah.
And I'm not
Well,
exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. We haven't had a shutdown corner since Deion Sanders.
He's like everything that you wished Richard Sherman would be.
Richard Sherman Richard Sherman is, I don't even know where he is. He's probably, I don't know, running the hymn session set in the IR room. I don't know.
And speaking of IR, Brash is delighted that 2 players are coming off IR, and 2 more are going back on it. So the more they change, the more they stay the same. All right, Aussie dude, you get the privilege, the absolute status symbol of leading off the discussion on the game of the week, otherwise known as the John Gruden game, book 3, edition 3, whatever you want to call it. John Gruden returns to the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers return to John Gruden, whatever. Take it away, Aussie dude. What was the best part of that game?
For me, probably the 3 hours of sleep I caught during the game. How many times is Tuck Rule mentioned during the broadcast? I'm guessing I'd say over under 10. But no, I didn't watch it. I knew that this would be I expected this would be a pretty easy game for the Bucs with how they are. They're probably, as long as they can stay out of the cold, they're the most balanced team in the NFC because they have a great defense because they're good at every level and their offense is just starting to really click with Brady, and now Gronk's starting to find some rejuvenation or some other ingestibles down in Florida. But
Gronk's probably the one guy that could get COVID and actually benefit from it.
COVID probably wouldn't do much in your system with all the other,
shit he's got
infections you might have. Because he had the Super Bowl party boat that was full of strippers and the Gronkowski family and whatever else it was that I think was basically just... I think that's the party boat from Minnesota, isn't it?
Yeah, the Vikings one. Yeah, Culpepper passed on the name. The contact people.
All right.
Kids out there who don't know what engineers, do not Google it.
Don't Google it.
Given Aussie dudes about to take the podcast into all kinds of breaches of PG classification, Blackie, I'm hoping you watched at least the 3-minute highlights. And was it overblown? Was the John Gruden experience really not quite what it was billed as?
I think it's been all right. They've looked pretty good. The Raiders.
Oh, okay.
I think
so the team that lost by 25 points have looked pretty good.
I think, well, I'm talking about long term. I think they're trending in the right direction for sure. But I think if you called the Bucs the best team in the NFC, I doubt many people would argue with you. Aussie dude might. But
I literally just said that.
I'm more mad because you're a Green Bay fan.
We're under the radar. We do better, and then it's less painful when we fuck up.
Yeah, fair enough. You should give some of that humility to Philly next time he's on. I think Vegas had quite a few issues, but they've made Carr look really good. They've brought some players in that made the offense better. Brian Edwards been injured. Ruggs looks really good when he's on the field and does a lot for them. They've turned Nelson Aguilar into a pretty decent player. All they need now is to do better on their defense. Crosby's obviously really good, but Clelin Ferrell's not getting anywhere near the output that you'd expect from a pick 4. I think if they focus on their defense over the next couple of drafts, they'll be pretty formidable. I think the only issue they've got is they're going to be in a division with Mahomes and now Herbert for the foreseeable future.
Brash, did you happen to study this game, or does your dislike of all things Las Vegas mean that you weren't interested?
No. Let me correct you on that. I love everything about Vegas. I didn't give this game a lot of attention because, as my learned colleagues have already said, I think it was pretty well laid out there which way this would go. It is a bit worrying how well-rounded the Bucs are becoming as a football team, and now see Gronkowski. That's all you need. Gronkowski now catching touchdowns as well. The defence was always good, and as long as they look after the ball, I'd have to think that if not number one, then 1A as far as best team in the NFC at the moment.
And I believe we might leave the detailed discussion to next week's preview, but I believe that somebody might have joined the Buccaneers. Yeah.
Yes.
So they're only going to get stronger potentially. Or Gronkowski, Brady, the new bloke, and Bruce Arians are all going to talk honestly to each other for about 37 seconds, and then they're going to start pounding the shit out of each other on the sidelines. Yeah. How many egos can you fit on a pirate ship?
Depends if you had phone reception on the pirate ship.
Very good. Very good.
He doesn't seem to do it face to face. It's all via Instagram or Twitter or his phone.
It'll be interesting to see how Arians deals with the personality, because now he's made he's had no qualms at all putting Brady back in his spot at various points this season. It'll be interesting to see how he goes with his new toy that he's got.
Especially because he was so publicly and dismissively against any kind of move for Brown, not even 18 months ago, when it was first brought up in a different circumstance. Now all of a sudden it's okay to get him on board. It'll be really interesting to see if Antonio can let those comments go, or if he carries him around like a chip on the shoulder,
I think he's got bills to pay. I think Mr. Brown's got bills to pay, so he might be motivated to do the right thing for a little while.
So about 3/4. Blackie, what do you reckon?
He's been pretty out of sight recently. Maybe Deion Sanders was providing guidance to him. If anyone can show you how to be humble, it's Deion Sanders.
Agree with that. And in all seriousness, I do hope that Antonio sorts his shit out, because he's still got a fair bit of talent. We might wrap it up with one of the stats from the 8th best division in football, because I know Brash loves my stats, especially my stats from the 8th best division in football. There was only one team entering into week 7 that didn't have a single 60-yard rusher. In other words, a running back that had run for 60 yards, or in a couple of teams' cases, a quarterback that had run for 60 yards in a game. For whatever reason, Washington hadn't had that yet. Antonio Gibson sorted that shit out real quick. He had 72 yards on only 7 carries, including a touchdown, in the first quarter of the game. So that's how bad Dallas's defense were. They took a team that had not had a single 60-yard rusher in any game this year, including some games against the high-quality teams like the Philadelphia E-Girls, and they fell apart so badly in the first quarter that they let Antonio Gibson steamroll them for 72 yards and a TD. That, for me, sums up week 7. It was the week that the pathetic became so pathetic that it was almost impossible to defend them, and we had quite a number of really good teams emerge. So let's move on to week 8. We'll do the preview. Anything else from week 7, Aussie dude?
We'll probably talk about how bad the Bears are, or we could do that in the preview unless they have the bye.